think how ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists, but they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
The courtroom felt like it was seconds away from bursting into flames. Every seat was taken, bodies pressed against the walls, and not a single eye moved from the woman in the center, Whoopi Goldberg. But this wasn't the confident celebrity from daytime TV. This was a woman drowning in panic, her spirit crumbling right before the world. She couldn't even lift her head. Her hands clutched a pen like it was the last piece of her old self, but that pen hadn't touched paper once. Her face had lost all color, her posture collapsed. It looked like every bad decision she'd ever made had come crashing down on her shoulders all at once. Suddenly, the doors swung open with a force that rattled the air. Boom! The judge stormed in with the weight of judgment in every step. He smashed the gavel like thunder cracking the earth. "Order in the court!" he roared. But what followed was a silence so thick it almost screamed. Everyone knew they were about to witness history. Across the room, Karoline Leavitt sat unmoved, cold, calm, and carved out of pure willpower. Her stare never broke. Her breathing didn't change. In the middle of a storm, she sat like a lighthouse made of steel and truth. Then it happened. The judge leaned in and dropped the words that turned the room upside down. "Whoopi Goldberg is hereby sentenced in this defamation case," he announced. Gasps tore through the gallery like a wave of thunder. Whoopi's eyes shot open in absolute horror. Her jaw hung open, but no sound escaped. She sat frozen, like her soul had been struck by lightning. Time itself felt like it stopped just to watch her fall. This was the very lawsuit she once laughed at, the same case she brushed off with smug grins and sarcastic jabs. But now? That laughter had turned into silence, and that silence was deafening. Karoline didn't move a muscle. No victory smirk, no nod of triumph. She didn't need to show anything. The truth was already screaming louder than any applause ever could. Then came the storm that nobody saw coming. The judge pulled out a folder and started reading it aloud. Emails, memos, internal commands, all soaked in controversy. Every word hit like a blade, but nothing compared to what followed next. The courtroom held its breath as the judge delivered the final blow, a bombshell message from ABC News President Kim Godwin. Effective immediately, Whoopi Goldberg is suspended. The room erupted in total chaos.
ABC News President Kim Godwin saying in a statement, "Effective immediately, I am suspending Whoopi Goldberg for 2 weeks for her wrong and hurtful comments. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments."
You know, when you're a certain age, you use words that you know from when you were a kid or you remember saying, and that's what I did today, and I shouldn't have. I should have thought about it a little longer before I said it, but I didn't.
Each word the judge read cut deeper into Whoopi's already shattered image. Her reputation wasn't just bruised, it was bleeding out in front of a stunned nation. One leaked note from a senior producer screamed across the screen, "Let Whoopi lead, her words will trend." That wasn't just strategy, it was sabotage disguised as entertainment. This wasn't a harmless talk show anymore. It was a guided missile aimed straight at Karoline's name and dignity. Then came the moment that stopped hearts. A flash drive was slid across the courtroom table like a loaded weapon. All eyes locked on it. Everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air like static. The judge took it, calm as stone, and inserted it into the courtroom computer. Within seconds, the screen came alive with fire. Evidence exploded into view. Emails, secret videos, private memos. It wasn't a presentation. It was a reckoning in real time. The footage played with ruthless honesty. No edits, no filters, just truth laid bare in high definition for all to see. Whoopi's face went ghost white as her own words lit up the screen. The messages were merciless. One email read, "Push her on age." Another ordered, "Let Whoopi strike first." These weren't off-the-cuff remarks. They were strategic attacks planned behind closed doors. This wasn't journalism. It was a full-on ambush, a setup dressed as a segment. And now, the entire country was watching it fall apart in broad daylight.
I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah. I think she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
I want to be clear, though. It's not her first job. It was her first press briefing. She worked in the previous Trump administration.
The gallery exploded into chaos. Reporters smashed their keyboards like they were striking gold with every keystroke. Phones lit up with alerts, and headlines erupted across screens. Breaking: Whoopi collapses in court. The story didn't need crafting. It was writing itself in real time. This courtroom was no longer a legal chamber. It had transformed into a full-blown reckoning for the world to witness. And Whoopi? She had nothing left to offer. No comebacks, no witty lines, just silence soaked in regret. Then came another shock from the bench. The judge read aloud a damning quote: "We can count on Whoopi to trigger her." The words echoed like a gunshot. The plan wasn't hidden anymore. It was right there in black and white, with the whole world watching it unravel. Whoopi dropped her face into her hands, her features twisted under the crushing weight of public disgrace. The glittering crown she once wore as daytime royalty shattered on the floor, now replaced with the jagged edge of humiliation. ABC couldn't spin fast enough. The cameras stayed locked in. Reporters kept shouting. The narrative had broken free, and it no longer belonged to the network. Even her legal team looked defeated, hollow-eyed, fumbling through paperwork like it meant something. Their whispers carried no power anymore. The tide had turned, and no one was coming to pull her out. Then, boom! Another digital dagger hit the screen. A screenshot from ABC's internal Slack channel flashed before the court. It read, "She'll crack. Trust Whoopi." The setup was undeniable, calculated, ruthless, cold. The judge finally called for a recess, but Whoopi didn't move an inch. She sat there, completely still, as if time had cemented her into the ruins of her own legacy. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, it was total mayhem. Protesters packed the streets like a thunderstorm of voices. Signs soared into the sky, and Karoline's name rang out like a battle cry. "Justice for Leavitt!" they shouted with fire. A security guard leaned in close, speaking softly. "Would you like to step outside?" Whoopi's lips barely moved as she whispered back, "No. I didn't think it would come to this." But it had, and it had come with the force of a tidal wave. Unstoppable, unmerciful. Karoline didn't blink, didn't boast, didn't flinch. She sat still, calm as ever, like a woman who already knew the truth had won.
The most divisive and disgusting speech that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever given. He essentially waged war on half of the country by saying that we are all a threat to democracy because we believe in putting America first. It's not radical to want to put your country and your own people first. It's not radical to want to have a strong border, a strong military, and to unleash the might of your own economy, not economies around the world.
The media storm didn't just roll in, it exploded like a nuclear blast. Screens everywhere screamed in unison, "Goldberg found guilty!" Karoline Leavitt's victory goes viral. The world hit pause. No one could look away from the spectacle unraveling live. Up inside ABC's towering headquarters, chaos erupted like a riot behind glass doors. Phones rang nonstop. Legal teams spun in circles. Crisis managers threw out talking points like confetti, desperately trying to smother a fire that was already out of control. And then, from the back corner of a dimly lit room, came a chilling whisper. One staffer quietly told a reporter, "This is the end of Whoopi's reign. We're not just losing a host, we're losing our credibility." The words hit like a gut punch, but it wasn't just Whoopi on the chopping block. The entire empire of The View was teetering. A show that once ruled daytime TV was now cracking open at the seams, live, loud, and collapsing in front of millions. Inside the studio walls, fear spread like smoke. Producers rushed to wipe their hard drives. Assistants cried behind vending machines. Interns nervously whispered about quitting before the fire reached their floor. Meanwhile, Back in the courtroom, Whoopi sat like a statue carved from shame. Her voice, once booming across homes nationwide, was now nothing more than a trembling shadow, a whisper of what once was. The air in the room was thick with dread. You could almost hear hearts pounding. No one dared to move. Whoopi didn't even look up. She couldn't. She looked completely crushed, like the weight of 1,000 headlines had collapsed on her shoulders. Those words, her words, that once made people laugh and cheer? Now they twisted back like knives, cutting through her image and reputation without mercy. Every joke, every jab, it had all returned with vengeance.
I respect everything everyone is saying to me, and I don't want to fake apologize. I'm very upset about that people are misunderstood what I was saying. I just leave. I go home. I go home to my life, and I take care of my cat and do all the stuff I'm supposed to.
Karoline's team sat like an unbreakable wall of steel, calm, composed, and locked into every moment. Not a single flinch, not a single glance away. This wasn't theater for them. It was war for the truth, and they came armed with facts, focus, and fire. The judge re-entered with the force of a gavel wrapped in thunder. His face showed no emotion, only resolve. His voice sliced through the courtroom like a blade. "This court has reviewed the evidence, and it speaks for itself," he declared. The words struck like a bolt of lightning. Then, boom! The statement that blew the roof off the courtroom. This was not a spontaneous incident. It was a coordinated attack, rooted in corporate intent. The walls practically vibrated with shock. It was no longer a trial, it was a takedown of a media machine. Suddenly, the courtroom screen lit up again, and this time the footage was damning. A behind-the-scenes video played in full view. Clear as daylight, producers were seen rehearsing with Whoopi, instructing her to go hard on Karoline. The gasps came like a tidal wave. The truth was no longer hidden. It was screaming from the screen. This wasn't personal bias. It was a choreographed hit job written at the top and carried out in broad daylight. Whoopi watched in silence, her eyes wide, her face pale, her soul crumbling with every frame. The voice that once echoed across America, now reduced to a whisper buried under betrayal. Karoline didn't blink. Not once. She didn't have to react. She had already survived the storm. Now the world was finally catching up to the truth she had carried, alone, through every cruel headline and every mocking laugh.
I don't care if he's pooped his pants. I don't care if he can't put a sentence together. Show me he can't do the job, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's time to go.
President Trump's life echoed the sentiment that President Trump is a threat to democracy. And if you're a deranged lunatic and you're mentally ill, you will believe that lie, and yes, you will take political violence like we have seen in 2 instances against President Trump. Last week, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris said that everyone who showed up to President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden was a Nazi. That's despicable, dangerous, divisive rhetoric that is spewed by the Democrat Party every single day.
Whoopi's lawyer leapt to his feet, trying to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand like a sword slicing through the noise. "No more spin, no more evasion. The facts are clear," he thundered. His words slammed across the courtroom like a cannon exploding at point-blank range. Even the court reporter's fingers paused mid-stroke, frozen by the gravity in the judge's voice. This wasn't just a decision. It was a tidal wave crashing over decades of media privilege. Outside, the crowd's roar grew louder by the second. "Stand with Karoline!" They shouted like warriors in a revolution. The plaza overflowed with people, waving banners, filming with their phones, capturing history as it happened. On social media, the storm turned into a supernova. Karoline's strength, her quiet, fearless composure, was spreading like wildfire. Every calm breath, every confident glance, it was being shared around the globe like a modern-day anthem of courage. One TikTok had already gone nuclear, over 30 million views in hours. The video? Karoline flipping calmly through pages of evidence while Whoopi sat trembling in shame beside her. The contrast was devastating. It looked like something straight out of a courtroom thriller. Except it was real. Inside ABC's skyscraper, it was sheer chaos. Legal teams were shouting. Phones rang off the hook. Executives barked into speakerphones, "Terminate contracts, shut it down, damage control, now." The network was on fire, and no one could stop it. And Whoopi's image? It wasn't just cracked, it was incinerating in real time. Her once loyal fan base splintered overnight, torn apart by the glaring light of exposed deception. "I defended her for years," one former fan wrote online. "But now, I see what she really stood for. I feel betrayed." This wasn't just a controversy, it was a collapse so massive no PR team could patch it back together. Then the judge turned toward Whoopi, his eyes cold, his voice like steel. "The platform you were given came with power, and with that, responsibility. But instead, you chose to humiliate, to target, to destroy. That ends now." Whoopi's lower lip quivered. She reached out for something, anything, but her hand fell limp beside her. She looked like a statue melting in her own disgrace. Then, boom! The final blow struck like a hammer from the heavens. This court finds Whoopi Goldberg guilty of defamation, and hereby awards Karoline Leavitt $800 million in damages. The courtroom exploded in gasps. The number was colossal. It wasn't just a verdict, it was a warning shot to every media giant watching from their high towers. Whoopi's face twisted in sheer disbelief. Her mouth moved, but not a single word escaped. The voice she had once ruled television with? Gone. Silenced by the one thing she never expected, undeniable truth.
I respect everything everyone is saying to me, and I don't want to fake apologize. I'm very upset that people are misunderstood what I was saying.
Whoopi buried her face in her trembling hands, gently rocking as if she could vanish into the cracks of the floor. But there was no hiding. Not from the cameras, not from the public, and definitely not from the truth, now roaring through the courtroom like a freight train. Then, Karoline's lawyer stood up, solid as a monument to justice. His voice soared across the room, firm and defiant. "This was never about money," he proclaimed. "This was about clearing her name. And now, the world finally sees the truth." The crowd erupted in stunned silence, and then, bam! He raised a piece of paper like a final dagger of truth. A printed email with 6 ruthless words burned into it. Exploit her youth. Make her stumble. One sentence, one chilling command. It wasn't strategy, it was sabotage. Cameras fired off like gunshots. Shutters snapped in every direction. The courtroom flashed like a crime scene under the spotlight. No glamour, no laughter, just raw shame and the ruins of a fallen empire. The judge sat still for a long, heavy moment. Then he slowly closed the thick folder with finality. His face didn't flinch. His tone didn't waver. "Court adjourned," he said, his voice forged from steel. "Justice has been served." Then, slam! The gavel struck with the sound of judgment itself. The crowd stirred all at once, like a wave crashing toward destiny. Reporters raced to the doors. Phones dialed in every direction. Outside, media trucks blinked with red lights, their antennas pointed at the sky, ready to blast the story to every corner of the earth.
ABC News President Kim Godwin saying in a statement, effective immediately, I am suspending Whoopi Goldberg for 2 weeks for her wrong and hurtful comments. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments.
Karoline stood up from her seat like a pillar rising from the ashes. No smile, no tears, just pure, quiet strength. She didn't need confetti or applause. She had walked through fire and come out unbroken, forged into steel. She turned to her legal team with a calm nod. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. And together, in perfect unity, they walked toward the exit. Not with arrogance, but with purpose in every step. This wasn't a victory lap, it was a march of truth. Behind them, Whoopi didn't move. She sat frozen in the wreckage, her eyes empty. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but she didn't even blink. She looked like a fallen queen, powerless, defeated, and cornered by her own past. Security approached carefully, offering their hands. Whoopi slowly rose, but it wasn't a walk, it was a collapse in motion. Her legs buckled slightly, her arms dangled, her cheeks soaked in tears. This wasn't just the end of a trial, it was the downfall of a media dynasty. She passed the flashing cameras, but not a word escaped her lips. Reporters leaned in, desperate for a quote, but she had nothing left to give. No jokes, no excuses, no final curtain call, only silence wrapped in shame. Outside, the crowd parted like a miracle in motion, some too stunned to speak, others cheering with joy. And then came the chant that shook the sky. "Karoline! Karoline!" Their voices echoed like thunder crashing against the courthouse steps. Then, Karoline stepped into the light. No raised arms, no podium speech, just presence. The kind of presence born from truth, pain, and absolute resolve. She didn't need to say a word. She already was the message.
Everybody makes the choice in life. If I have to be concerned that you are upset with me, you're thinking, oh, you and I have a connection. You don't realize there are 10,000 other people who are yelling the same stuff at me.
A reporter leaned in, microphone trembling with anticipation, the world holding its breath. Karoline stared straight ahead, unshaken, and delivered just 5 words that shook the earth. Let this be a reminder. And in that single moment, she rewrote the narrative of an entire generation. The crowd went wild. Cheers erupted like 1,000 fireworks in the sky. Applause thundered across the plaza as social media exploded. Hashtag, let this be a reminder. Justice served. Truth over fame. Her words didn't just echo, they became immortal. Across the country, news anchors fumbled to describe what had just happened, but they couldn't. This wasn't just a headline. It was a cultural earthquake, too big, too raw, too real to be contained. Meanwhile, inside ABC's towering offices, mayhem reigned, doors slammed, badge access revoked, meetings disbanded in panic, lawyers swarmed the corridors like a plague of consequences. The network wasn't in damage control, it was in full collapse. Executives shouted over one another. One panicked voice screamed, "She's finished! We can't spin this! It's over!" Another executive, ghost white, whispered, "And we might be next." Leaks started pouring online within minutes. Emails, memos, internal chaos. It was all spilling out in real time. One chilling message stood out. Terminate all ties with Goldberg effective immediately. The machine was trying to clean house, but the fire was already out of control. Sponsors didn't hesitate. They ran. Statement after statement hit the airwaves, condemning reckless behavior and unethical media practice exposed during the trial. The collapse wasn't just loud, it was irreversible. Whoopi's image disappeared from ABC's website like it never existed. Her show promos vanished. Her name, once stamped on every screen, was suddenly erased, forgotten by the very empire that once worshipped her. While one empire burned, another began to rise. Offers flooded in for Karoline. Book deals, streaming documentaries, legal summits, political platforms. The world wasn't just watching, they were listening now. But Karoline didn't sprint for the spotlight. She walked with grace, calm, deliberate, wise. While others shouted over the noise, she let silence carry the weight, and that silence roared like a lion. In her hometown, church bells rang out in joy. Families waved hand-painted signs that read, "Truth won today." The local newspaper headline thundered, "The victory heard around the world." Back inside the now-empty courtroom, the echo of history still hung in the air. A janitor swept slowly across the floor and paused. "I'll never forget what I saw here today," he whispered, his eyes full of awe. Because this wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. A legacy fell, a truth-teller rose. And across every screen, every street, and every soul, justice didn't whisper. It thundered.